Hi there, I'm Bex. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'll be painting a crocodile in watercolour. Earlier this week, I watched a really interesting video by Arlie Bean, who's another watercolour artist here on YouTube. She was making a custom watercolour palette and she also made some colour charts to go along with it. I thought this was a great idea, so for this piece I challenged myself to use a limited colour palette. And after watching Arlie Bean's video, I was really inspired to create my own colour chart that I could use as a reference throughout this painting. I actually think this was incredibly helpful and I could see myself doing this for any combination of colours that I use in future paintings. I would definitely recommend it. To read the colour chart, you just need to follow down the diagonals and this will show you what colours to mix. For all of these mixes, I tried to get as close to a 50-50 mix as possible. Obviously, there are so many different variations you could get, so you could add more layers to this if you wanted to, but just getting the basic 50-50 mixes of each colour was enough for me to get started. The watercolour set I'm using for this video are the Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolours. These are not professional grade watercolours, they are student grade, and I feel like in this video I really did kind of push them to their limits. I would be interested in investing in some higher quality watercolours for future videos, but at the moment these are really good for experimenting and practicing. Okay, so now that my colours are ready, I am about to transfer my drawing onto my block. Now, you can't use a light box for this, which is a little annoying, so to transfer to my watercolour block, I just like to use a really heavy pencil. I think for this I used a 6B pencil, scribbled over my drawing on the back, and just flipped that over and traced around it. This is really a simple technique, you've probably used it a million times yourself. Just to get the composition of my drawing right, I like to do my sketches digitally and then transfer them to the block. I also have a faint grid on the block, so I know where is best to position the sketch before I transfer it down. I'm just going to start by masking off the lightest areas of the sketch, so the teeth, any kind of yellowy areas on the skin, a little bit of the eyes and things like that. I like to mask off. This is just so that I can preserve the white of the paper and I don't need to worry too much when I'm putting down my initial washes of colour. I pre-mixed some of the colours from my colour chart in my palette before I started my first wash. This is really important to do because it means that when you're working wet into wet, you don't have to stop and mix colours. For the wet on wet technique, you need to work quite quickly, so it's really helpful to kind of plan ahead first. Now that I've got my first wash down, I did find that some areas of the initial wash were darker than I wanted them to be, so I just used some cotton pads and a kind of rough brush to lift the colour off the page. Something I really like about rough watercolour paper is that it can take a bit of a beating. It's quite heavy duty, so scrubbing it with a hard bristled brush really doesn't damage the paper. It certainly didn't when I used it, and I wasn't gentle. Another really cool thing with the texture of this paper is that you can drag the brush across it and the pigment just kind of sits on the higher bumps. I don't think I made the best use of the rough texture of the paper in this painting, but I hope that in the future I'll be able to find a better way to incorporate that texture into my work. I did find that using a dry brush across certain areas of the crocodile's head was very helpful and left an interesting scale-like texture, which you'll see a bit later in the video. Anyway, you're probably sick of me talking now, so I'm just going to shut up and let you enjoy the painting process and watching this come together. I've never painted a reflection in water before. I found this extremely challenging throughout the entire painting process, but I gave it my best shot, and I do think that I was, I guess, a little more successful than I thought it would be in the end, but man, did it take a long time to get there. By no means is the result perfect, but you know, I gave it a go, I learned an awful lot, and I would be interested to try it again in future to see if I can make a better job of it. Needless to say, it was a very fun challenge, and yeah, this took a number of hours to complete. At around this stage, I was about ready to give up with the painting, throw it in the bin and start over again. I didn't have an awful lot of time, so I thought it would be better to just crack on and try to make the most of it, and actually in the end I'm glad I did. At this stage in the painting, I am also using some paint with less water than I usually would on it, and just using the side of the brush to scrape it along the top of the paper. This means that the pigment sits on the ridges and it gives you a really nice scale-like texture. Okay, so here is a really fun trick that I find extremely useful, especially if you're working in unrealistic colours and you're struggling. At this stage of my painting, I was pretty much ready to throw in the towel. I had no idea where to go with it, so I decided to turn my camera onto black and white mode. Unfortunately, that means that the recording is in black and white, but if you film your artwork, this is a really helpful way for you to check your values. Sometimes if you're working in vibrant colours that are very different to your reference picture, certain colours can look lighter or darker than they actually are. This depends on what colour that it's next to, but you know, if you have a shade of orange and a shade of blue next to each other and they're the same shade, they might not look it necessarily. I sometimes think colours, warmer colours can look a little lighter and cooler colours tend to look a little darker than they actually are. I don't know if that's just me. But anyway, I find that by switching my camera to black and white and switching my reference picture to black and white, it allows me to simplify the whole process and just concentrate on the values. I think especially with the reflection in the water, this helped me tremendously, and to be honest, I don't know how I would have done this painting or if I would have even finished it without using this technique. It was super helpful. So yes, if you're painting something with lots of interesting and bright colours and you don't like how it's looking, check your values. This is probably the easiest way to do that, but if you don't film your artwork or you don't have a top-down camera handy, you can just use your smartphone and stick a black and white filter over it. So at this stage I'm just using some white ink to add some highlights, as in certain areas I've got a little too dark. I also find white ink really helpful for a little extra definition and a little more contrast to the piece. Stupidly, I had my camera in the wrong place, so I'm very sorry that you can't see the full reflection, but I promise you at the end you will see it properly. I was having quite a lot of trouble with the snout area. I am not entirely sure why. I don't think I managed to get it right in the end, but I didn't have a whole lot of time to spend on this painting, and sometimes it is more valuable to just move on and take what you've learned forward with you into your next painting. So to finish things off, I'm just using some of that white ink to add some highlights and some splatters. I thought this would maybe add a little bit more interest to the water and just make it look a little more fun. We go for the least satisfying tape peel in the world because the paint doesn't really reach the tape. I like to use it anyway on the block just because it gives you that little bit of extra security. I tend to use quite a lot of water while I'm painting. So here it is, my crocodile painting. Leave a comment, tell me what you think, and let me know what you would like to see in the next video. Have a great day!